Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's been an exciting day so far.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Are we having fun yet?
We are having so much fun. And that's why I do this.
I
I would
know.
say when it ceases to be fun, I'm done. But this is so fun. Most people who do podcasts batch record. So this has been a day of recording. And this is the first time I've recorded 5 episodes in one day. So I was wondering how it was going to feel getting to episode number 5. And the conversations have been amazing and inspirational. And I am happy to be here for episode number 5 today.
Episode 5 today. I have to tell you, I think today I've consumed 2 cups of coffee and some Tostitos. Don't do what I do, people. Do what is it? Do as I say, not as I do. But you're right. Each conversation just like propels you to the next one, and I'm really loving seeing the connection between what everyone says and how everyone's having similar experiences. Like this is what I mean about transcending cultures and ages and just all kinds of different types of diversity. Is like the truth will always be the truth, right? The right will always be the right. Love is always going to be love. I just
Exactly.
Julia, you're the coolest. You are. I just love
I
you.
am, because you are.
Oh. You guys didn't know you were going to be signing up for a big love fest today,
right? No, but that's a huge lesson for people. So we often talk about when people's stuff triggers you, or when you see shit in other people, like that's the mirror reflecting back to you. And I love that, because that shows me where I still have room to grow in my being, and it's amazing. But I also remind people, when you see something beautiful, wonderful, amazing in someone else, you can only see that in them because it exists in you.
Oh, that's beautiful. You're so right. You're so right. These last 2 weeks have been kind of crazy for me. I'm sure but sharing with the audience, I've had the highest highs and the lowest lows. We had our oldest daughter recently got married. We drove down south to the Florida Keys, and we had this beautiful, casual, barefoot on the beach type of wedding. And as I mean, me, I blessedly run the entire range of human emotions. Like my emotions are always on the extreme. I can be super, super happy and super, super sad. And I don't know what people do in the middle, but, I just do. I just experience life that way, and honestly, I love it. I love that I'm a feeling person, but, so here I am at this wedding, and every minute that gets really happy and really awesome, I also feel really sad, and I'm really crying, and I'm like, oh my God, it's the daddy-daughter dance, crying, the vows, crying, walking down the big beach, crying, and then at the same time, like everything was like this was such a fun wedding, to tell you that there was a part where our second oldest son, he was walking down the aisle kind of like the ring bearer, but instead he had a belt that had like beers in it, and so he was passing around beers to everybody. Get a cold beer, get a cold beer. Like it was hysterical. Right? And it was so nice to be with everybody, and then sadly, because this is how life is, just a couple of days later, my father-in-law passes away. The bride's grandfather, like my partner's dad. And we've been together 17 years, so a huge part of my life, especially for someone like me who has an absent father. And and that had, although it was overwhelming sadness, it had such moments of beauty and gratitude. We were very fortunate that we were able to leave our wedding vacation a little bit early. We got to do the whole wedding, which was perfect. And my partner's dad had called, and he said, sorry, I'm gonna cry now. He said, I told the doctors to keep me alive till you got here. You know, I told the doctors, keep me alive till you get here, you know, to my partner. And so but he says, but please enjoy the wedding. So we enjoy the wedding. We have a great time. We wake up the next day, you know, come home, repack our bags. We drive 12 hours to South Carolina, and we got to do exactly what we wanted to do, which was to see grandpa. You know, we got to go in the room, and you know, everybody got to say their goodbyes. And then a couple of hours later, you know, they called us back in, and, you know, everybody got to say their goodbyes and be there with him, you know, so he wasn't alone. Woo, listen to me. But there was so much beauty in that, you know, and that we got to do that so perfectly, right? So like this, it's like, this is the yin yang of life, right? Like the high highs and the low lows are really the one and the same, you know, it's the flip side of each coin, you know, like we would not have experienced such sadness had we not experienced such beauty, right? Like, you know, so you can't be mad at the sadness, you know, like that's one thing I think about a lot of times, you know, like especially when I might see my kids hurt or something like that. I'm like, you know, you really can't begrudge the bad times, because the only reason they feel bad is because you had a good time on the other side of it, you know? So life is just a fun little journey, you know, and we're grateful for everything, you know, we're grateful for all of that. I'll end this story on a funny, typical Graciela moment. So, you know, I'm a perfectionist. You know, I love, I'm also an old English teacher. So I shouldn't say old, used to be former English teacher. So my partner and I, we spent about 3 days writing the obituary. It costs like $650 to publish online and an actual newspaper, which, by the way, I don't know if you know, but the current cost of a newspaper is $4.50. Like, I don't know what's happening. But anyway, so
I didn't know they still made them. So
yeah, well, let me tell you, it's this thin and it's $4.50. And I was just floored. But anyway, we went through all this effort to make sure that we hit all the grandchildren, all the great grandchildren. You know, he had 13 grandchildren, 5 great grandchildren, like everybody's married and divorced, you know, so I'm checking spellings, I'm checking names, you know, I'm putting commas in the right place. And about 2 days after the obituary gets printed in the paper, my daughter says, oh, can I read it? I'm like, of course, sweetheart. So she gets the paper, she opens it, and she starts reading, and she goes, in this giant list of grandchildren, you didn't put Aiden and I. I literally left out my own children from the obituary. So of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just printed something that's literally for all of time. How did I do this? Oh my gosh. So the lesson here, let it be, and 4 people read it, by the way. It wasn't just me. It was me, my partner, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, like her sister-in-law, like, and grief does a number to you, you know, like
yes.
Yeah. So on the upside, my kids were very understanding. It was actually really sweet. My daughter Abigail, she's 13, and she's like, "It's okay, Mom. I understand. Sometimes people get overwhelmed, and you know, they just, you know, these things happen." So thank goodness she took it in stride. But I was beside myself.
Your kids are amazing.
Thank you.
We got a guest to bring on. Are you ready?
Well, I don't know. Now that I've made a mess of the place, yeah, let's clean up a little here.
Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Hi. Welcome. I think this was my first time crying on the show, so you're welcome.
Really?
Yes.
I'm actually proud of you.
I mean, it was your first time like cracking out a tissue, but you know you've teared up before.
I was gonna say, I don't know.
We'll have to have our audience keep me accountable and let me know. Was today the first real time? I don't know.
Oh my. So Vanessa, we would love for you. We know you very well, but our audience doesn't know you yet. So would you please introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Vanessa Seltzer. I am one of the lucky people that get to call each of these beautiful women friends, and that I've known for years now. But I am by day the director of philanthropy at Arc Broward, who helps any individual with disabilities. And in my extracurricular time, I am the incoming chair for the Women's Council with Fort Lauderdale Chamber, and the current president for the Association of Fundraising Professionals here in Broward. I'm also blessed to be a mom of 2 and married to my favorite little ginger, Sean Seltzer.
You just do a few things, Vanessa, huh? Just a few.
Just a few. They say you attract what you are, like you attract the energy you put out. And I have started to notice, and especially in this conversation, looking at the 2 of you, I was like, I gravitate to people who are not, I wouldn't say overachievers, but find fulfillment in achieving new things. And that's like where we find like joy and so many other emotions. And I was like, but wow, the things that we've done in the years that we've known each other. So
I was just listening to you make that list, and I was like, oh my goodness, she sounds like me 2 years ago.
yeah.
Pull up, Vanessa, pull up.
So many things make sense from 2 years ago now. Now I get it.
Julie, I don't know if you know the story of how the first time Vanessa and I met, which also has a crying component.
She was there the first physical time we met, because it was at her office.
Was it? And then we had coffee?
We were all in.
I thought coffee was our blind date. No.
Oh my God, you don't even know our story. Okay. So a lot of people in the universe around us kept saying, "You need to meet this person. You need to meet this person." And in the true, current time of meeting people, we became Facebook friends first. And so, liked all the stuff. And this had gone by for months that we were Facebook friends. I was going to you, Julietta. That was around the time that I was going after my C-section. And I was in the waiting room. And I can't remember if I was in the waiting room for an event that you were doing or because I was waiting for an appointment. But Graciela was there with the kids. And I remember because I recognized you and I'm like, oh my God, that's her. And I remember going up to you and waiting for you. And then you finally put 2 and 2 together. And so we immediately planned coffee, which ended up becoming this 3-hour soul revival for both of us.
Exactly.
Literally. I mean, when I tell you we both blocked out an hour, we literally were there for 3 hours. We cried. Each of us cried probably 2 to 3 times. And it was like a spectrum of emotions. 1 minute we'd be crying. The next minute we would be cracking up. And the next minute we would just be speaking so very Cuban, passionately about something.
Yep.
And I mean, then I just followed her wherever she went after that. Wherever you are, I'm going.
We've been chasing each other in circles ever since,
Yeah.
And in some of our previous shows, we the theme of being in nature, creating a memory has come up a lot. And it's funny because I don't remember the waiting room story that you just told, but that day, I mean, aside from the fact that it was 3 hours, I remember just how good it felt. And we were sitting outside. We were at a local coffee shop that had an outdoor section, shaded and beautiful. And just, man, there really is something about being outside and being in nature that just gives everything that really sweet just touch, to that cup of coffee. So yeah, that was definitely a special event.
I do remember as you were retelling it, I do remember being that wait, how do you guys not because I totally assumed that you knew that you had met before. And so I have this vague recollection of that happening.
Yeah, we apparently have similarities that everybody kept tying us together.
It was really funny. It's one of those things where everybody's like, what? You don't know Vanessa? How could you not?
And the same response, how have you not connected with Graciela? How do you not know? As if I was just I don't know. It just hasn't happened.
Well, I want to get on to our first question because I've known you for a while now and I've watched you do all kinds of different things with your life. And I know you are loving where you're at Arc Broward. I know you're a giver and a volunteer and a philanthropist at heart. So can you, and you don't have to keep this to ARC, but you know, I know you've had the opportunity to be there for a while now. What, give me one of your like yummy success stories that just keeps you inspired to keep doing what you're doing?
So for me, it was, it was partly the reason why I stayed in nonprofit for so long and really like what I leaned back towards. So when I started in nonprofit, I started on the case management side. I started as kind of like a light social worker. It was at Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've always been an advocate that if I'm going to work here, I'm going to volunteer here. So I was a big sister, and I'm of Latina descent. So I wanted a young, teenage girl of Latin descent. Could be from anywhere. And there was this 13-year-old girl that I mentored for some time. And she reminded me so much of myself that I was just like, I was almost too protective of her in some aspects, because I was like, you don't know what you're walking into. Like, these are our personalities, our sensitivity are not just for our other people, but the words that people share with us will set you back if you give it that power. And I, remember constantly pouring into her. And then life happened. That was actually the organization where the CEO sat me down and said, you should go into development and fundraising. You have the natural skill set. And so that unfortunately meant I had to leave the organization. And it was because of a dear friend years later who was still working there that said, hey, do you remember the girl? Well, she just graduated college.
That's
she
awesome.
Just, and this was someone who was the perfect statistic. She was the perfect, the perfect storm was around her for her to not be successful. I still get chills for her she had everything against her. And, of course I Googled like her life away, and I found her senior picture. I felt like a stalker at one point, but then I found her senior picture, and it said, words have power if you give it to them. And I was like, this is why. And it was in a moment in my life that I needed it. I needed to remember the reason why I let my cup go empty and continue to pour. I needed that. Jokingly, Graciela, this was right before Excuse Me one year. I was just done. I was done with everyone, everything. I was in the middle of an infertility, battle. And it was just the one reminder where it was just like, even years later, this is now 8-10 years later, she's 23 now. I don't know where she is in the world, but that one thing that I kept trying to tell her, I'm not going to saved her life, but at least it, I felt like, okay, my ripple effect was the right kind. I didn't cause an earthquake in Japan. So so that's always the story I leaned on. And before that, it was just stories of my parents, the things I saw that they did out in the community, the things that I saw them do for me. I would always tap back into and always say like, okay, this is why I want to continue to do this. This is why I want to be who I am unapologetically. But yeah, that's probably my favorite memory.
So that story, like if I ask her the question that I'm going to ask you, her answer would probably be what you said to her. But what I want to know is, what's one piece of advice you learned from a woman that changed your life?
So again, things to remember about me is I'm just a very sensitive person. I was that kid who cried when other kids cried. Even if I was perfectly content with my world, I'm just very empathetic, but I'm also, words kill me. Actions hurt me and stay with me for a very long time. It was a friend of my mom's. And my parents would say this, but when your parents say things, it doesn't stick and you're like, oh, whatever. she said this to me. It was when a friend had, you know, as teenage girls do, screw you over and you feel like garbage. And it was in kind of a crossroads where she was reaching back out and wanted to regain the friendship. And something in my gut was telling me, I don't think this is good. Like, this person is taking out more than putting in. And she just said to me, she's like, you know, remember when someone shows you who they are the first time, remember that, because that's who they are. The good and the bad, no matter what, you have who they are, and you make the choice to either say, you know what, I see you for who you are and I still love you, or I see you for who you are and I wish you the best. And it's something professionally, personally, that I've always held on to, and that in some variation have always shared.
I feel that so much, you know, and this conversation is reminding me of our first cup of coffee, because so much of what you say I've also experienced. But I love that you said, you know, because when you say when someone shows you who they are, what you're really saying is see someone authentically, right? Mm-hmm. Like really see, don't try and put a story to what you're seeing, just be neutral.
Don't justify it. Don't justify them.
Just right, experience it, see it, and then live your life from that point. And I love that, you know, your message isn't exclusionary. It's not like, oh, I see you, let me get away from you. It's like, okay, I see you, and now how do I check in with myself, right? Like, how do I feel about that? Is that okay? Is that not okay? You know, I one time had someone tell me, don't expect more from people than they're capable of. And I was like, what? Because I would get so frustrated that somebody wasn't.
I just said that to my husband.
Right? Right. Well, and you know what? Again, it sounds like so like argumentative and facetious, but truly, if you look at it, honestly, it's just easy, right? Like as simple as like my son not picking up his room. Like he's physically not capable of doing it. It's just not gonna happen. So like, why am I putting all this pressure on something, right? Like if your partner is a partner of words and not of gifts, don't expect a gift, right?
Exactly. And it's picking up on those kind of things, especially in your point to your relationships, you know, in some occasion it's with family members, and it's like you've known them their whole life and they've always been this way. Why are you expecting something different? And I always kind of internalize what she told me about, you know, meeting someone where they're at is you have the choice to say, look, that's not the best you. I don't really like that you, but I'm still going to invest in this relationship because of it. Or this doesn't serve me and I wish you the best, but you have to move on. Either way, you just have to like accept it and move on. Because they're still going to be who they are and you're still going to be who you are. And I think for me, when she worded it that way, I got it. I was like, okay, it's not, and it's also not me. It's not, you know, it's very easy for me to justify your bad behavior. It's very easy for me to say, oh, well, you have so many things going on in your life. It's okay that you completely disregard me and my feelings in my life. But yeah, I mean, I'm always probably going to I'm the collector too. So I'll be like, it's fine.
What do you mean by that? The collector?
I was very much the girl that was like, I could help you. I can help this. Whether it would be with men in relationships, I was very much that girl who thought she was the fixer, or friendships that didn't serve me. And, you know, it was very one-way road. And it's taken me even up until the last year or so with some friendships to say, as much as this hurts, we're not helping each other be better. We're not bringing good things to each other's lives. So one of us has to say it and one of us has to just, you know, say, this is the time to go find the people that will, because we're taking up space of someone who can serve you and can be there for you and can do all the things.
And it's okay to evolve, right? Like it's okay that a relation, like not everything has to be forever. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, some things have a season and that's okay. I'm good with that. I know you've been, well, as Julietta says, you know, a lot of our audience, they really love reading and things like that. And it sounds like you've picked up a lot of knowledge over the years. You know, can you give me, like, what's your book recommendation? Give me a book, like, you know, and not the one where you've been studying for that exam recently, whatever that was.
Can I tell you I'm taking it again? That it's like, this is how I like to punish myself. But anyways, so it honestly, I had to think long and hard because I was stuck between two. And then I was like, I don't want to like go the route where I think a lot of people are going to go, like Untethered Soul and all this stuff. So I have two. The first, if you are not an 80s, 90s reader, then you may not remember this book series, but find it.
No, just kidding.
Chicken Soup for the Soul. So I think I don't know what edition I had, but I remember, and background on me, I was raised by two servant leaders. So all we ever did was help other people. Like it was not crazy for me to wake up Christmas morning and somebody outside of my family magically appeared at our breakfast table because they showed up and my parents took them in. Like that's who raised me. But when it's normal to you, you don't see its power, you don't see its validity. And so Chicken Soup for the Soul was the first time I read something where you saw it almost from both point of views. So, because most of the time it was the person that was hurting or in a state, in a place, and they wrote about the power of someone helping them. And so for me, that was the first time I saw the importance, the power, and really the first time it lit a fire in me to want to be that person that helps someone else. And it's such a simplified version of it. I mean, they're just letters that people wrote about impacts that other people made in their lives. So for me, that spoke a lot. And the next one I actually have with me.
Woo.
A lot of us know Erica Obando, so it's Without a Voice. I read this book. I was with an organization for about 5.5 years. I, was doing all of the things that I had mentioned before, but I felt very much in a rut and almost like I deserved to be in this rut. And I was almost self-deprecating. And so this book kind of reached me. Her story is very shocking. When you meet her, she's very love and light, and you leave feeling like you can take on the world. So you would never think that her backstory is what it is. So the shock of reading that in great detail and everything she's had to overcome, but also so being inspired by that, but also the tools that she gives you that are so realistic to be able to use and actually implement. And one of them really was about like taking chances and really taking that next step and knowing that you deserve that next step, and it might be scary and it might be hard, but if you never take the chance, you're never going to know what could actually happen. So it was kind of like kismet. I read it at the right time in the right place, and I was in a place that open enough to accept it. And that's when a week after I sat down with who is now my boss at Arc. I was kind of still in those preliminary conversations about taking over such a coveted seat on being chair of the Women's Council. And I'll reread this when I need those reminders. So if you're in a place where it's like you just feel like you need a good like shove, or a good inspiration, I mean, for me, this book is torn apart because of that.
Well, that conversation definitely leads us into our next question. We all take risks and do things, and you've done quite a bit of that for yourself. So what is one risk you've taken, one thing you've done that you'll never regret?
I mean, I'm sort of in it right now. I'm sort of living it right now. I left a place that I was known for. I left a place that was comfortable. I left a place where I was the, big fish. I could do no wrong, to purposely throw myself into something that I knew would be a challenge, both personally and professionally. So, professionally, I'm doing different things in my career and things that are challenging, so just to kind of break it down. So I mainly work with corporations and their corporate responsibility, but this now has me working with individuals. So asking individuals to give. And for me, that was always it was easier to ask a big entity, right? It was easier for me to ask this large corporation, but to look an individual in the face and say, I believe in this so much, and I know that this mission is so powerful, can I connect you to it, and will you give? Is a big step, and personally, because although cancer, I think, has hit every home and every relationship. I know somebody's impacted by cancer. Working with individuals with disabilities spoke to me because I have a nephew on the spectrum who, so I've been there from when he was born to now 17, and hearing my brother and sister-in-law going through the same struggles that the families that we serve are going through. What is my child going to do after he graduates high school? Is he going to be accepted into adult communities? How is he going to be treated? Is he going to be able to have any kind of remnants of independence? Because they're both such alpha independent people. So, and I was raised, my godparents are essentially like an extension of my grandparents, and their daughter had disabilities, and she's probably was one of the brightest lights I ever knew. And so for me, I'd always wanted to work with an organization that does what ARC does, and helping transform the community's vision of those with disabilities. But it's also intimidating sometimes for people to communicate with someone with disabilities, to engage, and, getting to learn. I get to see my mission alive every single day, and I get to talk to different people with different levels of disabilities every single day, from preschool to seniors. So for me, I feel like I'm serving my nephew and my cousin in that regard. So for me, this is probably the organization that has hit closest to my heart. So, and with that can be a risk. It can be hard every day, to have their faces and continue. But I will say, ever since I've made the jump, the universe and God has given me signs that I've done the right thing, and I'm finding successes. I'm connecting with individual donors. I'm, really become more comfortable in that arena. And I am constantly reminded of the purity of happiness because of the people I serve. There is no one that is as genuinely happy and sees things as genuinely and purely as the participants that we serve. And even on my worst day, I'm reminded of I should be finding my happiness, because if I can't, if they can find it, I can find it.
Yeah, that's something, I've, in my world, now I mostly work with the general population, helping them with pain and other things. But historically in my career, I have worked a lot with the special needs population. And it would be so interesting in my clinic because we had both populations. Usually those kids, and they have their own clinics that they go to separate from, but in my universe, both of these populations would collide. And the patients, with their back pain and whenever they would come out, oh, that just makes me so sad, and and how, how terrible this is. And I would explain to them, these kids are the happiest kids that I know. They are like the source of pure joy.
It's so true.
I'm like, you will not see any pure joy and love than what comes from these kids. And they'd be like, oh, I had no idea. And then you'd see them come in the next time and they would like interact with the kids. You know, it's like before they were like afraid of them, terrified of them.
Yeah. And it's
sad for them. And then they'd realize like, oh, and they would. And so, yeah.
And just even as like the adults, you know, so part of what ARC does is they have a post-secondary program where they can get certifications and then find work placement. And I think there's such magic in seeing someone like finally have confidence in themselves and really like when you see it, like when you really see it in their face that like, I can do this and I can do it on my own. So to think about as an adult, like you're 23 or in your 30s and all your life, people have told you can't, you're not going to be able to do these things on your own. You're always going to need me. You're always going to need us. And for them to have like this option to not need anyone and rely on themselves is like, especially with my nephew turning 17, like he's so smart, but are there reasons why he'll probably have to like continue living with my parents or with his parents? Yes. But to know that there's hope that he's going to have that independence and be able to have that confidence and for the world to be able to see what we see every day makes just brings me life every day. It really does.
And I think this, you know, what you do and how it's also changing generational concepts, right? Like, you know, people with disabilities, you know, 100 years ago were locked away somewhere, right?
Even 30, 40 years ago, they were institutionalized in our own community.
Right. And we're not doing that anymore, you know? So when you talk about your nephew living with his parents, like, so what? Like, how awesome is that? Like, I wish, you know, like, okay, like, you know, this concept of being independent, you know, something that triggers me a little bit because I'm like, you know, like being independent is great and all, but it's also very like an alone concept, right? Like we should be dependent on each other. We should be, you know, we talk about this all the time as parents is like, you know, you're in your house, you're by yourself, you're going nuts. And it's like, you got no one to reach out to because everybody's in their little, you know, home with their walls and locked in together, you know? So I see your nephew having, you know, maybe his own little apartment, right? But like on the same property as your brother and sister-in-law, right? And like, how awesome is that? Yes, be independent, but like, let's also take pride in being a community, right? Like, let's pride in helping each other and being together, you know?
Yeah. And I just love the concept of changing perspectives. Absolutely. I think it plays into a lot of like the Women's Council and what's poured into me. But yeah, to that point, it's like seeing them, even like we're doing a pageant, an empowerment pageant for girls right now, between the ages of 6 and 17 who have different disabilities. And it could be Down syndrome. It could be they're, you know, they're because of their disability, they're in a wheelchair. But the first thing that one of the girls said to me was, I just want to make a friend.
Yeah.
And it was like, now you've immediately made 15 and more than that. And so for me, it's just, there's just no pure reason of why a fundraiser does what they do. There's just, so yeah, long story short, take the risk and just have confidence in yourself and have, to your point, a tribe around you. So I think checkpoint number 1 is, do you have the people around you that whether you fly or fall, they're going to be there, because if I didn't have my tribe, literally, Julietta helped me when I couldn't make the decision between which job to choose at a bow tie kids event. I just walked right up to her and I was like, I can't make a decision. I need your help. She's like, okay, think about it. And now hold up your arm. And so
there you go.
And, you know, Graciela will always be that person to tell you, no, you can do this. Stop thinking you can't. You can do it. So have that tribe, but take the risk.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love you. I love it. The last thing I want to say about community, I'll just share a funny little story about my son. So one day our friend gets married and we're at like the rehearsal dinner or an engagement. I think it was the engagement dinner. And we had never had our families all together in the same place at the same time. So it was cool to see all the other family members and friends and whatnot. And one of the family members has autism. And, you know, he's grown up, got a job, you know, the whole bit, no problem. And he sits down to talk to my son, and my son is ADHD. And so my son has a conversation with him. And when this guy talks, he is talking at 100 miles an hour. He's like, and then I do this thing, and then I do this thing, and this thing is so amazing. And it's like this, and it's like that. And he's just talking 100 miles an hour. And I'm just watching them chat, whatever. At the end, 3 hours later, my son gets in the car and he's like, Mom, that guy was so cool. He talks just like me. Like, it's so.
I knew as soon as you were saying it, he was probably like, yes.
Yes, it was almost like now I felt bad. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not cool enough. Like, this guy's way cooler than me. Because he was just like, he was on, like, he got it. They got each other so cool. And so I love that you work for an organization that creates community where you are together with, you know, people that talk like you know?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to ask you our last question. And I know, and you talk about your parents a lot. So I'm really curious as to where you're going to go with this, because I know you love your kids, and I know you love your husband, and I know you love your family. But just share with us one last, sweetest, most delicious memory. Give us something to savor while we go on.
Oh man. I hate to choose. I hate to make a favorite, right? I don't want to have a favorite.
This doesn't have to be your favorite. It's just one.
No, I would just say like the one that immediately comes to my brain, and it's because it was my life's biggest struggle. It was my hardest journey was getting pregnant with my daughter. You know, they're 3 years apart because it took 2 years for her to come to this world. And I would have to say it was the first time I heard her heartbeat. Because of the journey it took to get there, it was, miscarriage. And I mean, it was a far enough long miscarriage that we had already told our son, we had told family. It was, a lot of shots, a lot of tests, the whole gamut that you go through with infertility. But it was also because it was recorded. So, not only because it was during COVID, so my husband couldn't be there. So it was essentially FaceTimed, but I was able to because I always do, get one of the nurses to record. And it was just like this happy, like those laughing tears where you're so overwhelmed with emotion. So it was hearing her heartbeat and then seeing my son have just a fragment of that same emotion. Because even though he was so little, not really understanding, he was old enough to understand a heartbeat. He was old enough to understand there's a baby in mommy's belly. So that was the first time it was like for real for him. And it was the first time he kissed my belly. And you could tell it was that time that our family was finally complete.
That is very sweet and very delicious. I love that.
And she wiggled. She was dancing. So that's why we call her our little dancer. She's she hears a beat, she's dancing.
Love it. Love it. So knowing you two ladies, this show could go on for hours, and but we can't. You can carry on your own elsewhere.
Well, our good news is that our coffee dates have turned into wine dates. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here. I can't tell you how much I love you and appreciate you. And I know that your words, as they literally go around the world, I'm always so impressed that we have such a wonderful and delicious audience. I know it'll make an impact. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for what you guys are doing and creating this space.
Such a pleasure having you. And have a great day, everyone.
We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.